Greetings, comrades, boys and girls, those who like to bounce in between. It's Comrade Dankey here today with a video explaining the basics of socialism. So if you're brand new to this movement and you don't know what any of these words mean, stay tuned because by the end of this video, hopefully you'll understand more than you did when you clicked on it. So without further ado, let's talk about what is a capitalist. Well, a capitalist is a person who owns the means of production. This could be like a factory or a mill. In Marxist terms, they are referred to as the bourgeois class. And this is something you'll see in Marxism a lot. He refers to the capitalists, these private owners of the means of production, as the bourgeois or the bourgeoisie. And he refers to the workers as the proletariat. So it can be a little bit confusing for somebody first coming into the movement, first starting to read about these ideas, but all that you should take away from this is that a capitalist and a bourgeoisie is the same person. So what do we mean when we talk about the means of production? Because that's a strange word. Well, the means of production are the methods by which commodities are produced in a society. It could be a factory, it could be a workshop, it could be a farm, it could be the machinery used to run all of these various things. They're all forms of means of production. So when we talk about a capitalist society, we're really talking about the ownership of the means of production. So in a capitalist society, the means of production are owned by the bourgeoisie, private individual capitalists. So this raises the question, what about the rest of society? What about the people who do not own the means of production? Well, they are the working class. The industrial worker, or in Marxist terms, a proletariat, is a member of a class of people who do not control the means of production. Because of this, they're forced to sell their labor to capitalists to sustain themselves and their families. The capitalist, the bourgeois class, and the workers, the proletariat class, are caught in a class war due to the class antagonisms of capitalism. And this is what Marx and Engels were trying to say with all of their writings, was that there was a class system based on the ownership of the means of production, with the bourgeois class owning the means of production and the proletariat class being forced to sell their labor to the bourgeois class in order to eke out an existence in this capitalist system. So because workers are faced with horrible conditions, low wages, high rent costs, etc., they fight back against the capitalists by going on strike. The capitalists then send in strike breakers, police, media smears, and bribe politicians to suppress the labor uprisings. This is the basics of class war. The class antagonisms come into effect because these two classes of people are battling over ownership of the means of production. The bourgeois class consists of a small elite section of society, while the overwhelming majority of people are proletariat workers. You have this classic pyramid of the capitalist system, where the workers are supporting the decadent bourgeoisie who use the military and the police and the church to fool the working class. But a lot of people get bogged down in where the actual exploitation occurs. So the exploitation occurs when a proletariat labors. They are producing value for their boss. Some of that value that they produce are returned to the worker in the form of a wage. But the majority of the workers' generated value is reinvested into the means of production. And the remainder, the surplus value, is converted into profit by the capitalist. So you have a scenario, let's say a worker makes a clock, and the clock is worth $10. It costs, $2 worth of material, and the workers paid a wage of $5. So that means the capitalist makes a surplus profit of $3 after all is said and done. He invests $2 of those $3 back into the business, and the remaining is profit. So the capitalist either pockets that profit or uses it to buy out politicians, buy out police, buy out the media. But regardless, the worker is producing more than he makes in wages, and the capitalist is taking the surplus value of the worker's labor as profit. There's a myriad of conditions plaguing the working class. Low wages, poor conditions, long hours, and high rent cost keep the proletariat in a state of perpetual desperation, as they continue to submit to capitalist exploitation to avoid joblessness and homelessness. Now let's think about this for a minute. We had the industrial capacity in this country, the United States, to produce the goods and commodities needed to satisfy the needs of everyone in society. There's no reason, with the industrial and scientific capabilities of our society, that we have joblessness and homelessness, that we have poverty in general. But it's a consequence of this perpetual desperation of the working class that keeps joblessness, homelessness, poverty, and desperation alive. And it's by design. The working class must be desperate, or else they won't want to submit their labor to the capitalist masters. So now that we understand what the class system is, the proletariat, the bourgeoisie, the class antagonisms that perpetuate this system, and the conflict over the means of production, we finally arrive to socialism. So what is a socialist? A socialist is a person who wants the proletariat, the workers, to control the means of production rather than the capitalists. So Marxists are socialists who want the workers to organize state power into what Marx calls a dictatorship of the proletariat. This is contrasted by a capitalist society, which is a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. And a lot of people see the term dictatorship of the proletariat and they think of an authoritarian system, which is really kind of ironic considering that the current paradigm we live in is one of capitalist dictatorship, and one in which the capitalists control the society, the capitalists control the government, the media, the culture at large. This current paradigm is a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. The intention of installing a dictatorship of the proletariat is a revolutionary one because it will replace the ruling class of the society. It will depose the bourgeoisie as the ruling class and replace them by the proletariat. This is actually contrasted by anarchists, who believe in abolishing state power and that society should be controlled by trade unions or worker syndicates. There are also other kinds of socialists, these reformist socialists, such as democratic socialists, who believe that socialism can be achieved without revolution. And I put the Democratic Socialists of America on here. This is sort of half true. A lot of them are actually capitalistic. So, comparing them to somebody like Salvador Allende is a little bit disingenuous. But this is all to say that the left wing is diverse in its theories, its approaches, and its criticisms of capitalism. But for the sake of simplicity, let's just focus on the most developed of these theories, which is Marxist-Leninism. So Marxism-Leninism developed in the time of imperialism. This is the time in which we now live, where monopoly capitalism sought new markets and new resources, and the bourgeois countries around the world were fighting amongst themselves for dominance of the world market. In the time of the Russian Revolution, this was during World War I. So you had all of these different capitalist empires, bourgeois empires, fighting themselves, scrambling over already conquered territories. So Lenin built off the theories of Marx and Engels by opposing reformism and pushing for violent revolution and the establishment of a dictatorship of the proletariat, led by a vanguard communist party. So there's a lot to sort of break down here. But in the time of Lenin, there was what you call the Second International. And during the Second International, most of the socialist movement was for the war. They were supporting World War I and their own respective countries in that war. And Lenin rejected this. He rejected this nationalistic socialism and pushed for an international socialist movement. Just like Marx and Engels pushed for an international socialist movement. So in Lenin, you really sort of see a restoration towards the original envisioned ideals of Marx and Engels, and you see him countering this sort of opportunistic reformism of the Second International. There were a lot of socialists who thought that we could be elected into power, that power could come diplomatically within the capitalist system somehow. And Lenin, reading the works of Marx and Engels, rejected this notion and said that the state is ultimately the product of class antagonisms. And so by pushing for a socialist revolution within the state apparatus without actually doing a real violent revolution, then you couldn't possibly expect to win, because the capitalists control the society, they control the government, they control the elections. So a violent revolution, according to Lenin, according to Marx and Engels, according to Marxist-Leninists abroad, is the only way to establish a dictatorship of the proletariat. And another thing that makes Leninism unique is his insistence on this movement being led by a vanguard communist party. Lenin recognized that the vast majority of the proletariat are simply too downtrodden and desperate to be mobilized. Other portions of them are completely inundated with capitalist propaganda and become reactionary. And so a vanguard of professional revolutionaries was needed to guide the proletariat to state power by means of agitation and propaganda. So agitation is where you take an issue and you seek to inflame it, make it, you take a certain social movement and you push it a step further. And this is what Lenin means by agitation. For example, you take a strike for a higher minimum wage. Lenin would say, push that strike to its limits, get everybody involved, and use that strike to communicate your communist propaganda. So by agitation and propaganda, these were the methods by which Lenin sought to expand the communist influence in the left-wing movement. His conception of the vanguard party was one governed by what he called democratic centralism. This is a system where party decisions are binding to all members. Even if you didn't specifically vote for that measure, once a measure is passed, the party has strict discipline and everybody goes along that line. So this was a method to prevent factionalism, and it ensured party unity, which is extremely important, obviously. So you say that's all well and good, but what exactly is the end goal of socialism? Well, the goal of socialism is to liberate the proletariat from the exploitation of capitalism, to establish an economy and society run by the workers while abolishing capitalism and increasing the productive forces to meet the needs of everyone in society. This is balanced out by central economic plans that ensure demands are met and resources are efficiently allocated. Socialism raised the standard of living for the impoverished, semi-feudal peasants of Tsarist Russia. It took Russia in a single generation, it took Russia from a backwards agrarian society into an industrial and scientific superpower, one that was capable of challenging capitalist hegemony. It brought literacy, it brought health care, it brought increased living standards, and advocated for the liberation of women, the end to the patriarchal system, and an end to racial injustice and discrimination. Communists all around the world are at the forefront of progressive causes, and they have been throughout their history. So what is communism? This is the end goal of socialism. This is what a socialist government is trying to get to. Communism is a stateless, classless, moneyless society. In this society, each can give to the collective according to their ability and take according to their need. The state, being a product of class antagonisms, a proletarian state will reach a productive capability where scarcity is no longer an issue, and absent of the capitalist class and external capitalist influence, the state apparatus disappears naturally as a withering away of the state. This was described by Engels. So overall, what did we learn in this video? It was kind of a crash course, if you will, but we learned what capitalism was. We learned what the means of production were, who the bourgeois class is, who the proletariats are, how the workers are exploited, what socialism is, the difference between Marxism and anarchism, the difference between reformism and revolutionary socialism. We learned about Marxism-Leninism and the Leninist conception of a vanguard party. We learned about democratic centralism, and finally we learned about what is communism. So with all of that, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you learned something. Hopefully this will be the first of many parts in a video series. I'll just call it Marxism 101. And we can learn and grow together, comrades. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you have any questions? I will try my best to answer them. Thank you very much, and have a happy holiday.